Katie Pavlich from Town Hall joining us on the program. What about you, Katie? You're a country fan.
The first time I heard this song by Jason Aldean, which one of my favorite songs of all time is a Jason Aldean song, Amarillo Sky. However, the whole thing with his wife, and then this song came out, and if you've seen the video, it's practically like softcore porn. So I'm not a fan.
All righty. I have not seen the video.
I mean, don't let your kids watch it.
Okay.
That's bad.
That's good to know. That's been around, though. I mean, again, like, I think if my mom... See, I was really lucky, quote-unquote, I suppose, growing up, because I was the youngest of 6 kids. My mom and dad were... I was the happy accident, right? So they didn't get MTV. They didn't understand it. They didn't know what I was watching. They didn't... Yeah, they just... I saw stuff in the mid-'80s, Katie, that looking back, I'm like, wow, I'm really surprised that was on TV at the same time as, Silver Spoons and Different Strokes.
Yeah, true. But I mean, I grew up going to George Strait and Reba McEntire concerts with my dad, so the country, the bro country that's out now, and it tends to be worse in the summertime, I think, is really hard to take, I think. I think it needs its own category of pop country.
Right.
And then real true country can compete with true country, and pop country can compete with pop country. But the whole country thing is getting hijacked, and I don't like it.
Yeah, synthesizers in country music, steel guitars always take precedence over synthesizers when it comes to country music.
Exactly.
All right.
Amen. Now that we have that out of the way.
Exactly. Now we can solve the rest of the world's problems. All right, listen, let's talk about what's going on with Fast and Furious. Next week, we should see the release, knock on wood. Justice Department is supposed to provide that Vaughn Index next week, Katie, but we're already seeing some more developments here. Documents, you say, confirm that an AK-47 that was part of Operation Fast and Furious was used in a gang assault, not in Mexico, but in Phoenix, Arizona.
Right. So just to go off of what you said about the Vaughn Index next week, yes, that's supposed to be released on, I believe it's Tuesday, the 22nd. The Justice Department has been ordered by a judge after a lawsuit from Judicial Watch to release a list of documents and an explanation for why those documents are being held under Obama's executive privilege. Remember that those documents were put under executive privilege on the same day that Eric Holder was voted in contempt by the House Oversight Committee. Now, moving to the news from this week, another Judicial Watch lawsuit, thank God for them. They recently sued the city of Phoenix in August. The city of Phoenix Police Department specifically. They ignored that lawsuit for public information. They ignored that request for public information. So then they followed up with a lawsuit. They got the documents in the lawsuit back, and what they were looking for is there was this incident last summer at an apartment complex where there was a gang-style shootout, 2 people were injured, there were lots of weapons found, and there were federal agencies involved. So it wasn't just a local Phoenix police operation investigating this. Whenever there's federal law enforcement agencies involved, that raises a red flag. There's a bigger picture happening. So ATF, Homeland Security, the FBI, and the DEA were all investigating this case, which led Judicial Watch to think, well, I think there's probably some more information there about where these weapons came from that we need to look into. And sure enough, they get their information back, and this police report shows that one of these AK-47s that was sold at Lone Wolf Trading Company, which is now this infamous gun dealership in Phoenix that was participating in Fast and Furious, was found at the scene. So to give people some perspective here, that means that this firearm probably went from Lone Wolf to this. I know it went to a straw purchaser who was working from cartels who bought hundreds of weapons, by the way, sent to Mexico through their trafficking, and then brought back to Phoenix and used in this crime, this shootout at this apartment complex in 2013. And then, of course, they tried to cover it up by not releasing the information. So here we are again, years and years later. Nobody was killed in this instance, but people sure were injured, and a ton of resources went into investigating what happened.
We should not be surprised by this, and I don't think many people are. In fact, we know that there are probably going to be a lot more stories like this out there. Even Eric Holder has acknowledged that in his testimony. But every one of these stories, Katie, I think it behooves us to go back and again think about how this happened, how this was allowed to happen. You know, all these years later, maybe the Vaughn Index will provide some sort of answer in this regard. But, you know, you still don't have anybody connected to this operation who can explain how it was supposed to work, how it was supposed to go right. You know, I mean, I'm not a ATF special agent, but I can tell you that if you let guns go across the border, you don't have any way of keeping track of them. It's going to be really hard to effect an arrest based on those unless and until they turn up at crime scenes.
Right. Well, I think, you know, there's two reasons. The first is they don't want to admit that, you know, what the goal was. I mean, they've said the goal was to somehow track guns into these cartels and try to take off the top people to see if those, you know, which is ridiculous because there's no way they even tried to track them. I mean, out of 2,500 weapons, they put 2 GPS recording devices in them. I mean, that's not a tracking and tracing program. And the second reason I think that we still have had no clear explanation of what they were planning to do and how they thought this would work is because it wasn't supposed to work. It wasn't supposed to necessarily, you know, take down these cartels in Mexico. You know, there's plenty of email evidence, plenty of statements from ATF officials under oath about how they were using law-abiding citizens who run gun shops in the United States to facilitate an illegal trafficking scheme into Mexico. And then when those firearms from these gun shops were used in crimes, they turned right around and blamed those gun shops for being the reason that Mexico has a violence problem that is carried out through firearms, and therefore we need more restrictions in the United States. I mean, that's the bottom line. It was never supposed to work. There was always an agenda on the table. And unfortunately, you know, the story this week is that 2 people in Phoenix were wounded as a result of them using this firearm. And hundreds of people in Mexico have been killed. And Brian Terry's family, the Border Patrol agent whose murder tipped this whole thing off in 2010, 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, you know, they still don't have answers, and they feel like they really haven't been, you know, given a clear picture of what happened. And I'm pretty sure that the incident report from the murder that night still hasn't been released as well.
Jeez. All right.
And so, you know, there's a lot of missing pieces.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, you know, again, we get back to what may happen next week with the release of this Vaughn Index. We certainly won't know all of the details in these documents that have been withheld up to now, but you know, Tom Fitton has said there may be some documents that the Justice Department decides to release rather than continue to hold on to. We'll certainly have a summary of what these documents are all about. Katie, how confident are you that we'll actually see the DOJ comply with this judge's order and turn over and release that Vaughn Index next Tuesday?
Well, this is what I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see them release it, but I think we're going to see very limited explanation as to why the documents were withheld, right? So it's not only just a list of documents, they have to give an explanation as to why these documents can be justified as covered under executive privilege. And I think they're going to be very skimpy on the explaining end of things as to each document and why they're being held. But who knows? I mean, defying a court order would be a big deal, considering this judge has repeatedly told them that they're in hot water on the Justice Department side of things. So I hope that we get the answers, and not because I want them necessarily, but because I think the families deserve them, and I think that people need to be held accountable. And President Obama hasn't asserted executive privilege a whole lot, but he has in this case, and that executive privilege came after he denied knowing anything about the program for years. And then all of a sudden, the White House was getting involved to make sure those communications were covered up. And I think it's also important to see, you know, that list of documents before Eric Holder heads out the door as well. Not because I think it matters when it comes to the next Attorney General and whether, you know, that Attorney General nomination will agree with the way that they've withheld these documents.
Talking with Katie Pavlich. Listen, Katie, I appreciate you coming on the program this afternoon. And next time we talk, we'll spend some more time discussing the ins and outs of country music. All right?
Okay, deal.
All right. You know what? We have Nashville coming up, so it makes total sense.
It does make total sense, but we got to get to some real down-home, old-school country.
Amen.
Not this pop, tearing my T-shirt junk. Just saying.
Katie Pavlich with us from Town Hall here on NRA News, Cam and Company.